Welcome, welcome to the very last panel, last but not least panel of the day. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, welcome to our inaugural ACE Mastery Summit 2025. This has been a very special program today, where you guys are joining us from all over the state of Florida, and we are excited to have some conversations that we don't normally get to have outside of the confines of, CEUs and learning objectives. We get to talk a little bit more candidly in an open forum with each other conversationally, and it's been a beautiful day. So nice to see some of you back, many hopefully familiar faces, even though I can't see you. I know a lot of you guys have been with us throughout the day. This is going to be a beautiful way to close. So I want to say again before we start, a big thank you to all of our amazing sponsors who helped make this day possible. Truly, not just make it possible, but really actively participate as partners to make this successful, to make the conversations meaningful, and to make this content available to you guys on our website, H by TSK. In the coming days, we'll post the recordings from each session. But that's about HOA Now as our presenting sponsor, the Falcon Group, City Quiet, Plastridge, CAI Vendor Rembaum, who we're lucky enough to have here today in this panel, A1 Appliances, Hotwire, Oracle Profitability, The Paving Lady, South State Bank, TWG Enterprises, and WRG. So thank you guys all. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. So without further ado, you guys have heard a lot from me today, so I would love for our wonderful panelists to each give a brief introduction of who they are, what they do, and we can get right into the conversation. So let's start with Charles, go in the order that I see you guys today.
Well, thank you for having me today. My name is Charles Schumacher. I manage a high-rise here in Naples, Florida. I'm also the chair of the CAI Florida Legislative Action Committee is what it started out as. Now it's the FLA is what we call it for short. So we work hand in hand with legislators throughout the state on different bills that affect our industry. And I'm going to introduce Travis Moore because he's the star of the show who does more work than anybody else on these and even some of the lawmakers. So Travis, it's up to you, sir.
Hey. Thanks, Chuck. Thank you, Mario, for the invitation and to be here to all of you who have stuck around this afternoon for this panel. As Chuck mentioned, I'm the lobbyist for CAI and just drove back in from Tallahassee where we started the session, and we'll be talking about that. So thanks for allowing me to do this without having to wear a suit like I normally have to do. But I just drove the 5 hours back to be able to do this. So I'm ready to go and talk about what's going to be happening in Tallahassee over the next 60 days.
Excellent. Michael.
Good afternoon, Meryl. Thanks for putting this together. Chuck, Travis, Matt, always great to see you guys. My name is Mike Bender. Law firm is K. Bender Rembaum. For those who are not aware, we are a full service law firm representing community associations throughout the state. I also am a proud delegate of the Florida Legislative Action Committee under Chuck's tutelage and Travis's guidance, and looking forward to a very active session and engaging with all of you here and going forward over the next 60 days.
Excellent. Last but not least, Matt.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Kuisle. I am a professional engineer and a reserve specialist, also a delegate on the CAI Florida Legislative Alliance. Relatively new to the Alliance, but been doing reserve studies and now structural integrity reserve studies for quite a long time. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Fantastic. So the goal of this session is not only to bring you guys, legislative update, which we do often, especially with KBR and Michael's team around South Florida, and during the summer we do, on a statewide level, but we really want to talk about the legislative process and how you guys as our audience can be involved in that process and have a little better understanding from these guys what that looks like and what the process entails. So we're going to start off talking a little bit about the legislative process and, what are some of, the major challenges of getting bills passed, as well as some of the things that make it really successful. And whoever wants to kick that off,
Well, I'll just
please
start by
get in
saying that for those of you old enough to know what Schoolhouse Rock is, that's what we're about to do. How a bill becomes a law in the state of
love it.
Florida. So, Travis.
So the legislative session, even though we started right after the election in November, the new, House and Senate members that are elected, they determine who their leaders are going to be, who the Speaker of the House is going to be, who the President of the Senate, and then those individuals determine the committees. Everything works through a committee structure, so they decide everything from where you park your car, what office you have, to probably more importantly for our discussion, what committees you serve on, and who chairs those committees. And then they started meeting and having those committee meetings in January, but it was, kind of slow going. They had 1 week that was completely canceled because of a snowstorm in Tallahassee, which hasn't happened like ever. And then they had, ones that were turned into special sessions on immigration and all of that. So not a lot of bills were working their way through the process. Bills then get filed. House members can file up to 7 bills. Senators it's unlimited. You have to have a House and Senate companion bill that ultimately they have to pass. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as it relates to some stuff that we're watching in a second, but they have to pass identically, both from the House and the Senate. And then that bill would go to the governor's office, the governor's desk for his or her. They could either sign it or veto it, or allow it to become law without signature. And so right now we're in that committee process, even though, they had the opening day of session on Tuesday. Each chamber met, said this is what our priorities are going to kind of be. Then they go into joint session where the governor talks to them and gives a speech, and then kind of away they go. And they start by having committee meetings, and they're not really on the floor much at all for the first for the first half of session. And then at the second half, they're on the floor all the time because that's how they're voting on bills. The committees really only meet for about, session is 9 weeks. So now we've had the first week, essentially is done. So then you have 8 weeks of session. It started March 4th. It ends May 2nd. And committees are only going to meet for about 4 more weeks, for 5 weeks. So if you have a bill that has been referred, and most of them are referred to at least 3 committees, sometimes 4 committees, there's like the budget committees and some like the rules committee, fiscal policy in the Senate. They'll meet longer because all the bills will go to them, and then they're kind of that last little bit, the little faucet at the end of the funnel to determine which of all these bills that they've now got that they are going to let go and go onto the floor. So if you've got a bill with 3 committees, 3 different committees, you've got to get that really going, the next couple of weeks, or else it's not going to make it through 3 or 4 committees in what now will be about 4 weeks. Again, those final ones you have a little bit more time on, but
Travis, let me interrupt. Travis, let me interrupt. Then who decides which committees the bills have to go
the presiding? That's a good question, Michael. Yeah, the presiding officers and that staff in the like say the Speaker's office, they determine, all right, this bill deals with these subjects, so it's going to go to, let's say it's an association bill, it's going to go to regulated industries, which is has jurisdiction over really anything that has to do with DBPR, which would be like neighborhood stuff. Then maybe it'll go to community affairs. Maybe if it's involving like lawsuit issues, it's going to go to judiciary. Maybe if it's involving insurance, it'll also go to insurance. And then ultimately it'll go to either the rules committee or the fiscal policy committee if it has an appropriation, like last year's condo bill. They gave $16 million to DBPR to hire a bunch of people. So that obviously had to go through an appropriations type committee.
I want
So that's where we are. That's where we are right now in the process. The bill filing deadline is passed. So we kind of know the bills that are out there. Now there'll be tons of amendments and things as they work through the process. But, they're off and running, and then they'll end Friday, May 2nd.
Awesome. And we will get into some of the highlights of the proposed bills in just a minute, but I want to kick over maybe to Michael and Charles. How can the audience be involved in this process, keep themselves informed? What is their role?
Mike, I'll let you tackle that one first and I'll follow up.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Travis. I know that was there's a whole lot involved, and Travis is truly a superstar up there with what he's doing. And so that was a pretty succinct explanation of the craziness of 60 days in Tallahassee that's coming, or in the midst. But with regard to what we as individuals can do as board members, interested leaders, even managers or management companies, and all of us in the industry, it's important that you are aware of the bills that are being proposed. And the best way to do that is obviously to be, I would recommend, if you're not a member of CAI, either individually or through your association, you should speak to your local chapter. There are 8 chapters throughout the state. They all have memberships which are not expensive, and associations can join. And if an association joins, that allows you up to 15 board members per association for one flat rate. I don't know, Chuck, if you know that amount, but I think it's a couple $100, I think. But being a member of CAI, getting on the email list for CAI, a small portion of your membership fee goes toward what we're doing here in Tallahassee, which is there's 24 of us who are volunteers, Chuck, Matt, myself, and 21 others in the industry. We are cross-referenced. There are board members, there are managers, there are reserve advisors, insurance agents, bankers, lawyers. There's the true homeowner leaders, true cross-section, and we're throughout the state. And we go and work with Travis, and we are volunteering, but Travis is not. We have an executive director who's not. So a small portion of your funds do help pay for them and help to fund the work that we're trying to do in Tallahassee. And the way I say is we play a lot of defense. We're fighting the good fight. We try to get some good things through. We play a lot of defense. Where you can help is being you're a part of CAI, and certainly if you're on email lists of my firm, we put calls to action. When there are bills that are being put forth in committees, or even moving forward where they think there might be a vote on the floor, we put out calls to action. We want you to be reaching out to your local representative, your local senator, and you need to know who they are. There you go, Matt. Thank you, Matt. You can find your state rep where Matt's going to post on the chat.
Yeah, and every association, Matt, Michael, and I'll go right back to you, but every association, at the very least, you need to know who. It's only 2 people, a senator and a House member. So you can narrow the universe, and you need to at least know and be communicating with those 2 people. And it's going to be the same, obviously the same 2 people for everybody in that building, everybody in that location. So by going to those sites, you could just put in your street address and find out for your entire building who your state senator, who your state rep is. And then, you can let them know even at the beginning of session, hey, there's going to be association bills, both good and bad, finding their way across your desk. And if please use us as a resource and reach out to us so that they know that you're watching what's going on. And that's, kind of goes, I guess, without saying that, some of the folks that we, and I'll use this, this is friendly, but that we battle with, working to make sure that some stuff doesn't pass that's harmful. A lot of times they're people that are given a lot of money and all of those things. We don't give, money. Associations can't use their funds for contributions and that kind of thing. But what we have that's very important is our voice. We are, your voters, and that matters. That's the number one consideration. So
it should be.
Well, yeah. But it really is. Somebody like Representative Lopez has like over 600 condo associations in her district. That's a lot of a lot of voters, the vast majority, I would say, then of her voters are living in condos. So it's very important that those people are hearing from you. And then, as Michael said, send out alerts, make it easy for you, certainly at CAI, where we kind of tell you what to say. You're clicking, it'll tell you, it'll go to the right committee members that it needs to go to, so that you're not saying, well, who amongst this 160, there's 120 House members, 40 senators, and you're like, who do I even say my thoughts to? It helps you not only know what's going on, what to communicate, but who to communicate it to.
So the best way for you as a volunteer leader, as in the management industry and in the industry, is to be on to be a member of CAI. They will send emails out, calls to action, be on our mailing list, and go attend virtual and in-person classes. I mean, my firm offers them all the time. Others do, some others do as well, where we address certain things that are coming up, or that where we need input. And to Travis's earlier point, so Representative Lopez has put out a fairly substantial bill that will impact associations. Some of it may be positive, some may be not so positive, and we're just kind of going through it now. We'll touch upon it a little bit later, perhaps, but we're all just going through it now. And it's important, if there are things in there that are not going to be positive from an association standpoint, and this is where you're getting not just a lawyer's opinion, but you're getting someone who lives in communities in a condo, and other advisors. You need to step in. That's really your best way of being involved, is paying attention, and when calls to action come out, responding to them. Chuck, I don't know if you do, if there's other things that you can offer that you guys do out on the West Coast.
Yeah, a lot of times what we do at the West Coast is we do that exact thing. We look at certain bills, and then we go to those communities that it impacts the most and ask them how it would affect them. So when you get that end user information back, and we go to the different legislature and say, hey, this isn't going to work, and here's why it doesn't work, because here's these folks that are in your district, and let's say it's 300 homes. You say, well, this board in this community that we've talked to, they've outlined why it doesn't work. Sometimes a lot of these bills get thrown together, and it's kind of like a second thought, like they don't kind of think it all the way through until it's then passed, and then they get the pushback from their voting district that says, hey, this doesn't work, and then next year they're doing to fix it. So you kind of want to try to get ahead of that and say, as the end user of this product that you're putting through, here's why it doesn't work, and here's why it works. And that's the most important thing that everybody in their district can tell their lawmakers is what's working and what doesn't work, because they don't know.
Exactly. And I want to just add one last thing on this point. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Travis, but a lot of proposed legislation, comes from legislators hearing about issues from certain people. And when they are being told by certain people, hey, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is what needs to be done to fix it, when in fact these are one-offs, and there's, for every one negative, there's 20 positives who aren't saying anything because everything's fine. Well, you 20 positives, you need to speak up. You need to be saying, no, that's not a problem here. This is a different issue. You might want to address this, but that is something you are creating a solution for something that's not an issue, and you're going to handcuff all these other communities where that is a one-off. So it's really important that if everything is, if there are things that are working for your community, you let your representatives and senators know these are things that are working. You don't need to create solutions for problems that aren't there in the large majority of our communities. Otherwise, they will legislate the state based on issues that are presented to them that really are small in nature when compared to the scope of associations we have.
Yeah, one person will say, I couldn't put artificial turf in my yard, and they'll go to their legislators and say, homeowners associations don't let me do what I want my own property. And then from that, all of a sudden, and 99.9% of people are, like Michael said, happy. They've read their documents. They are living in that community because of certain architectural controls or whatever the case may be. But all of a sudden, all of those end up getting called into question or changed or modified because one person has an issue, talks to their legislator who's trying to be responsive, but misinterprets maybe that, oh, this is a big problem for everybody, parking, trucks, or they won't let me park my pickup truck, or this or that, and the other thing. And then all of a sudden we're dealing with it statewide. I
So
will
they
also
need to
say
hear
that
from
it's a
you.
lot easier just given the process and because of how fast things have to move. It's a lot easier to stop something from passing than it is to pass something. But what, we try to look at things and say, all right, this is something we support. It's fine, it's great, it's good, just as it is. This is something that we oppose, that it's just philosophically, it's not so much a matter of unintended consequences. I mean, this is just not going to work, like on this, maybe a construction defect issue or something. And then where most things are in the middle, which this is going to have unintended consequences. This we can make this better, or this is how it will work based on the end user's input, and we can modify it. And that's usually where we spend the bulk of our time.
Michael, did you want to add something there?
No, I just wanted to know if my volume is better.
Yeah.
It is better.
I think reinforcing the things that are working is such a great suggestion because it's something people may not necessarily think of, but is clearly super important. I want to, before we jump into kind of some of the highlights of the proposed bills on the table right now, I just want to kick it over to Matt and ask, what are some of the biggest issues and challenges you're seeing with your community associations?
Yeah, so we work with thousands of homeowners associations and cooperatives and condos throughout the state of Florida, and there's no question that the rising costs of living in a condominium association are probably the biggest challenge that communities are seeing. Insurance is still very expensive, though that's getting a little bit better in a lot of places, but the costs are still very high there. And of course, additional costs with repairs, because there's so many buildings undergoing repairs throughout the state, not only due to the new laws, but due to hurricanes and other damage and just aging buildings. There's extreme demand on restoration contractors. And so the costs of basic supply and demand have gone up. So just like the cost of eggs are going up, the cost of living in condo associations are going up, and that's the biggest challenge. I think that most of our boards are stuck with, because look, nobody wants to tell it. I'm a board member too in my condo, and I hate to tell my neighbors that we have to raise fees, and especially folks that are having maybe trouble affording it. But the fact is the cost, the sheer cost of maintaining the property does not go anywhere, and it is going to need to be funded.
Absolutely. Any best practices in dealing with some of those challenges from any of your perspectives?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think first and foremost is just being transparent with boards. I think that there's sometimes a hesitancy or a responsibility that board members feel that they don't want to share the bad news with folks. Again, these are people that you're friends with, that live next door, and you feel somewhat responsible because maybe you weren't expecting that yourself to cost as much as it did, and now you got to bear that bad news. But just here to tell all the board members here, this is not your fault. It's not your fault that eggs are $9 a carton, and it's not your fault that the cost to live in condos and the cost of insurance have gone up. These are just realities that we have to live with, and the best thing we can do is to be transparent so that people understand the true cost of living in a community association and the true cost of their home. Just like if you live in a single family home, costs are going up there as well. But that because you're the one responsible for writing the checks or making the payments when those repairs come in. But as a condominium board member, or as a condominium owner who's not on the board and maybe not involved with the committees, they don't get to see firsthand what those expenses truly are and how rates have changed. And so being transparent and over communicate and communicate again about why these things are necessary and what in the long run that is going to mean. Because there is concern about resales, there's concern about the value of condos slipping, and I think that once communities, what we've seen is, once communities get through these repairs, the values stay quite strong. But when there's a lot of uncertainty or unknowns, that's when values can dip, and we can end up with people not being able to protect their investment as well as they hoped they would have.
And that over communication is something we've talked about all day in a million different flavors and forms. So I hope this is just kind of doubling down on that for anybody who's been with us throughout the day today. It's great advice. I would like to, time is of the essence. I would like to jump into new proposed bills. And of course, we can't possibly cover everything, guys, so bear with us. We're gonna ask these guys to give us some highlights, so that we can, then have some conclusion to the conversation and give some speculation and a future outlook after we get through some of it. So, Travis, maybe you can kick us off, and each of you
Yeah,
can
I
touch
think
where it feels relevant.
I think the number one package, I guess, that we should talk about is this House Bill 913. And if you go to the sites also that Matt put out there, flsenate.gov or flhouse.gov, you can track these. And in fact, the Senate has a pretty good tracker that's free that you can sign up and get alerts in real time as these bills work through the process. And it'll track both House and Senate bills. All House bills are odd, Senate bills are even. So 913 is the House bill. The Senate bill that, and I'll use this word loosely at this stage, that matches up with it, that its companion would be 1792. So 1742, thinking of the date, 1792, Columbus. No, 1742, 1742. The House bills by Lopez.
Columbus
Senate
is
bill by Brad.
1492, Travis.
What's that?
Columbus is 1492.
1492. So
Too many numbers.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. Yeah, I guess in 17 we were well on our way to a country at that way. All right. Sorry.
A little levity, a little levity.
Right. Should I be the one talking about our legislative process? All right. So 913 by Lopez. The 1742 is by Bradley. If you think over the last few years, certainly since Surfside, there have been bills dealing with condo reserves and building safety, and there was like a original bill, and then this condo 2.0, and then they came back the next year with like a 3.0. So this would be kind of the 4.0. It's the bill that goes in that series. It's like Harry Potter. It's part of that series. But they are wildly different. And both of those legislators, those ladies have been the ones that have sponsored those bills through the last few, 4 years or so, now 4 years. So they are wildly different at this point.
Right.
And we could talk about kind of the differences. They will need to be negotiated through the process. And there's going to be a lot of give and take. The House is not going to pass all of the stuff that's in the Senate bill. The Senate is not going to pass all that stuff that's in the House bill. So there will have to be some negotiations. If you listen to the governor's speech, kind of the state of the state speech on Tuesday, he mentioned condos again. And he's repeatedly said, I think that the condo bills that the legislature passed, that I signed as governor, were necessary, were good, but now I think some tweaking that needs to be done to provide some relief. The House, not as interested in kicking down, extending deadlines. They're not as, reducing the amount of things you have to reserve for. Those kinds of things, I think, typically would be where the House falls. The Senate, their whole thing, even from the very beginning, was more just doing like the milestone inspections, getting a handle and a baseline on the building safety and where we are. The House more on the reserve side of things, and now they're trying to work out those differences. Matt, do you want it? It's really kind of hard to do a side by side because they're so different at this point. But I think we could maybe hit on some highlights of each, if you want to do that, or you want me to do that.
Yeah, sure. I can just give some of the bigger points there. I just dropped the links to both bills in the chat.
Thank you.
You'll see they're 80 plus pages. One is 99 pages. One's 83 pages. So there's a lot in them. Although many of the pages don't have a lot of changes on them, but there's quite a bit going on there. I'll start with, I guess both bills look at, because the last trip we took to Tallahassee, we heard loud and clear from the lawmakers that the biggest call, or the most frequent call and concern that they're getting is what I mentioned before, the affordability issues and the complaints about increasing costs and the additional burdens of funding the structural reserve study requirements, the mandated reserve funding for items. So both have some acknowledgement of that, I think, addressment of that. The 1742, the Senate bill has a much bigger opportunity to waive reserves. So it essentially says you can have a line of credit for all reserves until 2029. I think that becomes problematic in that there isn't in 2029 what happens. So that's kind of it's a massive deferral of funding requirements, and to a much lesser scale on the House side, they're proposing to allow 35% of the amount of reserves required to meet the reserve schedule to be funded through a line of credit for expenses that are 10 years or more out. So that creates its own kind of calculation problems and math problems, but there is a provision in there to essentially some reprieve to the requirement to fund reserves, but very far apart, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's if I may, what it seems like they're hearing from us, and us, I'm saying collectively, the constituents who we also represent, that desire to be able to have an opportunity to use a line of credit to help fund some of these reserve obligations. Without, I know, Matt, you're talking specifics. I'm not going to get more specific than that, other than to say the two provisions right now do not mirror each other. So that means that's going to have to be corrected. And in my humble opinion, both provisions will need some tweaking. You can't go with I wouldn't go with either one the way they're worded right now, but the concept's the right direction, in my opinion.
Correct. Both also have a provision in there which allows boards to make to pass special assessments or loans without the membership approval. So, and many associations can do this already. I think, Michael, you mentioned case law that kind of makes all associations, if there's something critical to be able to do, the board probably has the right to pass a special assessment or loan to get the project done. But this codifies it in both the House and the Senate. They do limit it to structural items or milestone type items.
Just to say that, just real quick to clarify. So right now, yes, if you have a necessary maintenance, repair, replacement, you'd have the ability to pass special assessment because the board has a fiduciary duty to undertake this work. And I don't think that, I don't know that everybody uniformly agrees with that, but if you have that right, it's borrowing they don't have the authority to do if the documents require a membership vote. And that's something that has handcuffed many boards. And so they're I think both provisions are suggesting, hey, let's give boards the authority to be able to borrow, not just in a state of emergency, which they could under the state of emergency changes that were made, but if it's based on a structural integrity, a necessary structural repair. Without getting too far down that road, Travis, I've already talked about the concern that raises when you include it and you limit it that way. For my concern is if they have to if the pool needs to be repaired, and they want to do it, and the documents require a special assessment, and they pass this legislation that specifically says you don't need a vote of the membership for structural, but the pool's not structural. Will that now lead to challenges from the legal challenges that, hey, board, you don't have the right to pass that special. The membership's not going to approve a special, and now they can't fix the pool that they have a duty to fix. I don't want to get, that's already too deep in the woods, but my point being that I like the concepts, they're the right direction, but hopefully with Travis's guidance and the legislators in Tallahassee have looked to us as a good resource, and I appreciate and respect them for doing so, that we will be able to communicate with them and maybe help wordsmith some of this to make it really rock solid. And to Matt's earlier point, not pass something which is good, but maybe causes a little bit of friction or confusion, and we have to revisit it in 26. Sorry, Matt, go ahead. No,
that's absolutely right. I think, yeah, all of this stuff you have to look at it. And that's kind of the neat part about our group, I think, F.L.A, just to toot our own horn a little bit, is that we have folks from all different aspects, managers, attorneys, engineers, homeowner board members are part of the group, and we can all kind of pick this apart and see how this impacts us as end users, to make sure we're not putting some additional burdens or creating an additional problem down the road from these, an unintended consequence, if you will, from these laws. Both both the bills address the potential of a conflict of interest with the reserve study provider, also providing other services. So that's been something that I think has been brought to the lawmakers' attention as something that could be a potential landmine, really, if a board gets a report and then at the same time gets a bid to do the work for the report from the same company, that it really calls into question the integrity of the report. So that both bills have a provision about conflicts of interest and at least disclosing the potential for those conflicts. And that's kind of those are kind of the highlight of the similarities, I think, on both of those bills. There's a lot of differences. The Senate bill actually moves the CSRS deadline back by a year, and it allows them actually to delay it by 2 more years if they've undergone a milestone inspection. So there's actually deferrals on a deadline that's already passed in the Senate bill, and then there's in the Senate bill also contains some I think necessary provisions on standardizing definitions and making the CSRS reports a little bit more uniform. There isn't a lot of rules or guidance along what the specific disclosures are, what the specific requirements are for the CSRS. So the Senate addressed that in their bill. The 913, just to wrap up, has a provision in there that says if you do not conduct the study. So 913, I feel like the House bill is a little more, doesn't have that flexibility with any deferrals of the CSRS. In fact, it says if you didn't do the CSRS, citizens cannot insure you. So that's a more teeth or more enforcement to make the folks go out and get their structural integrity reserve studies done. And it also has some other kind of, we talked about the voting, electronic voting. We talked a little bit about that, or did we not? We didn't talk about that quite yet.
No.
Michael, I'll let you, maybe you want to cover that portion of it.
Well, no, only briefly that this is in 913.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some provisions in the House bill unrelated to believe it or not, they actually did address things besides CSRS investment. But before we get into that, Matt, why don't you talk about the investment stuff?
The investment of
funds.
Oh, that's right. And that's more in 1742 than in 913. But yes, so there's currently, I think the associations can kind of, the statute's pretty silent on how an association funds their reserves. But this new bill would propose that all associations must establish an investment committee consisting of 2 board members and 2 non-board members, have them adopt a rule around investment policies, and must recommend a licensed financial advisor. I don't think the intent is to make every association do this, but the way it's written right now, it says like the association must do this, whether they have significant funds to invest or not, but kind of put some guidelines around that, and in a way, it just requires essentially hiring a financial advisor to invest funds
And
for
that's a
associations.
carryover of language that last year, Senator Pizzo, a number of years ago, had a bill on this. And then last year, I think it was last year, had language, or maybe it was the year before with 154, but had language as it relates to the lien stuff where this was added to that or was part of that. So when they carried over all of that lien language for this year, it was included. Now, obviously, that's probably one of those things where, again, they've got to negotiate this with the House. And I think if you're negotiating, you put in some stuff you can give up and give out, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's part of that negotiation. But I also agree with you, Matt. I think the intent was, at least on Pizzo's bill before and on the amendment before. I haven't talked to him since, but it was if you're gonna invest the funds,
here are the parameters.
Way you have to do this,
right?
Not to be certainly a mandate on everybody having to do something. So I think is probably drafted in a way that needs to be corrected, even going forward, to make it more, you don't have to, but if you're going to invest, you got to do it with these guidelines. But I I think that'll all get I think there's gonna be a lot of negotiations going on. There's also the piece related to, I was just reading it. Hold on. Whether or not there's question on whether or not it takes a unit owner vote or a board vote to assess, to pass a special assessment or get a loan, those kinds of things. And so I know that the House bill, looking at it, definitely takes the position of a board can take that vote as opposed to a membership vote on things that are repair items.
Right. That's what we were mentioning earlier. That was a concern I was raising earlier.
Not just for anything,
right,
but on repair items. Yeah.
Right. Well, great concept, but we have to discuss how that might impact associations whose boards have a fiduciary duty to fix things that are not considered structural repairs. Like I mentioned, the pool. Cooling tower isn't under the structure, under the
or a seawall. A lot of that stuff, Michael, and maybe I'm wrong, Matt would know it. That $10,000 catch-all kind of ends up catching a lot of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like
if they impact the other things, right?
Yeah, that's not specifically a G item, does get caught up in that G dollar amount item.
Only if it has a negative impact on one of the G items. So like a cooling tower,
like a
elevator does not, a cooling tower does not, in my opinion, a swimming pool, unless it's on the
although if
rooftop
a cooling tower
garage,
dropped a ton of water in the building, that could impact the structure. No, but we won't get down that path. But to Matt's point, that's my point. You have those items that are not considered under structural, though the way they've worded the bills right now. And for the listeners, and thank you again for staying with us, the point isn't to nitpick or attack a particular bill. It's really to kind of piggyback off the process that these things go through. And again, I reiterate that I think the concepts in these bills are solid, and they move in the direction that we collectively in the industry, as I reside in the community myself as well, but we all talk about what would be better for communities. I just am concerned some of the wording needs to be really better fleshed out, really we have to determine now, hey, what is the impact of this before it passes? Not let it pass and then see what the impact is and then have to come back again. So hopefully we'll be able to get involved in helping Senator Bradley and Representative Lopez massage their bills in that regard. Travis will have a lot to do with that. Chuck, what's your take on the investment stuff?
Excuse me, the investments are always a tough thing because you want to make sure that you have that clarity there with the board and presidents as to what that investment entails. And also, when the board is investing money, it's not their money. It's all the members of that community, and that's where you have to make sure that you're staying within the side of your FDIC insured funds. A lot of investors that you talk to don't do anything outside of bonds because that's government. It's government money that they're investing in, which has got a higher protection rate versus you don't want to hear a story about an association falling into like a Bernie Madoff type of situation where Association A was stolen from, given Association B, and then all of a sudden they all find out at the end that they don't have any money. So the clarity is there. I think that the more clarity that you have and procedures that are set in place by the statute for them to follow, that makes it easier for the residents to see, as well as also everybody's got an audit now. I mean, you've got audits built into the statute from here on out, so that's got to be spelled out as well. So there's a lot of protection that's built into that. So I think when it comes to those investments, as long as there's actually a set standard that's not overbearing and holds those accountable to keep the bad actors out, I think that's a good user-friendly type of legislation.
Certainly, again, the right direction. By the way, one of our listeners, thank you for pointing out what we're talking about with Senate Bill 1742 and House Bill 913. Just to reiterate, we're talking impacts condominium associations. This is not related to the HOAs. The bills are not referring to HOAs when we're talking about like the investments. To the extent that HOAs have statutory reserves, we're not talking about that. This is focused right now on the condominium associations. So a listener had asked that question, so I want to make sure I told everybody. So, and Matt, going back to what we were talking about then with the two big bills, and Travis, I agree with you. I think 1742 and 913. I know we have a couple of others that we can touch upon, but I don't think we should leave those without highlighting to our listeners that there are some provisions in 913. And Travis, you might be able to better express this, but which do need to be carefully watched by all of us who are residents, consumers, if you will, the language in these bills are very a little too developer home builder friendly, to the extent that they would could negatively impact associations and the residents within these associations. And there's language in 913 that does that, and there's another bill, 6005 House bill, where it's a one-page bill where they're looking to strike 4 words. But those 4 words that they would strike are words that we had included we collectively, meaning the organizations that fight for the good of the community associations that are run by the residents, that would allow for the ability for associations post-turnover to be able to go to the developers on addressing construction defects. And there's something called the statute of repose, which is, without getting deeply into it legally right now, it's basically a time frame within which you can bring a claim, period. And it was 15 years, not that long ago. It was reduced to 10, and in the last couple of years, it got reduced to 7 by those who I believe would be on the other side of the residential condominium interest. And so when does that statute of repose start was the challenge. And last year, I think very smartly, Tallahassee and the governor signed off saying that doesn't start until the unit owners have elected a majority of the members. There's a push this year to remove that statute of repose limitation. And I think that's something we all need to be aware of. And that's something you should be contacting your communities. Now, it may be a situation where you live in your community, and it's not going to impact you personally, but it impacts associations, and we should all be standing together on this as people who are in the industry who are on the side of the community association as opposed to the developer side.
Yeah, I mean, right now you may find yourself in a building that's older and not subject to this, but who knows? Maybe someday you move into a newer building, and then certainly you are impacted by this. So, and it's just a matter of it's a philosophical, it's a matter of control and allowing associations to make decisions. And if the way this would be, before an association even has any standing, the ability to do anything as it relates to a construction defect, they are, again, as it relates to condos, they are, prohibited from doing so.
Right.
And it's
as a very wise man once said
last year.
Right. I'm sorry. Say it again, Travis.
Well, it's undoing a change that we made last year. So that, quite honestly, some other interests, weren't aware of. And it's not our job to make them aware of everything. But they weren't aware of what passed last year. And so then when they found out this summer, they are not happy about it. And for no other reason, maybe than just I like a win against some of these. I don't want them to undo it.
And forgive me for thinking this is truly logical. Unit owners are not, and should, and as a very wise man named Matt Kuisle once said to me, it's basically saying that your warranty on the vehicle that you just purchased has expired before you've even been handed the keys. How'd I do with it, Matt? Good?
Nailed it.
Right? Because it's logical. What we're saying is until the unit owners are in control of the condominium association, of the building and the association, the purse strings, they're not in a position to raise construction defects related to the common element property. So we're saying, hey, until they're in control, there should not be any sort of clock ticking against them bringing in action. Again, forgive me if that's too logical, but that's the way it should be. And I think the legislators, the House and the Senate and the governor all did right by the millions of people who live in condominiums in this state. And that should not be changed in 2025 or ever. That's my soapbox. I'll step down now.
And that's House Bill 6005, is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll put a link to that one in there too, because I think that's a real important one.
Travis, do you want to touch upon the My Safe Florida condo?
There's bills this year. So the My Safe Florida condo program started last year, 5-year pilot program. The bill passed in July, but by the time they created it, because they had to create a whole new, inspection program and get everything ready, it didn't really launch until about November. And within, I think it was 6 days of launching, the money, because it was only $30 million, was already spoken for if all of those grants had been approved. So they put a stop to receiving any more applications. This legislation would increase the amounts and make some changes, such as before it took 100% of the voting interest to move forward with an application once you got an inspection, because you have to show as an association that you're going to put some skin in the game, because you have to spend, it's a matching program. For every dollar the association's spending, you're getting $2 back on these mitigation efforts. That is being changed to 75%, because as we all know, it's very hard to get 100% of owners to participate. So there's some good changes to that. I think there'll be continued to be some modifications there. Loosens up a little bit how the money, instead of being you have to use this amount for windows and doors, this amount for roof. It keeps the cap the same, but loosens up what you can use the money for within that. So those bills are out there as well.
So if you are in a condominium that may be able to take advantage of that, again, keep your eye on that, because that is something that is moving. There's the House and a Senate bill, and they're more closely aligned. Interesting, Travis, that 75% reduction. It also says 75% of unit owners, and they've added the words who reside within the structure or building. And I'm curious to know, again, to the point of what we're talking about, how bills become laws. Who reside, does that mean if you are a non-owner resident, if you're renting your unit, then you are not one who has to vote, your vote doesn't count, and they reduce the percentage? I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying
they were trying to get it right. They were trying to get it to not so much dealing with the renters, but with the large amount of owners that might be foreign investors or living in other countries, and they're not participating. So it's almost impossible to get that 75%. So again, that going to need to be clarified, though, for sure.
Right, because it sounds to me like what they're doing is reducing that. So if there's 100 units and 30 of those units are owner investors who don't reside in the building, then you need 75% of 70 units, not 75% of 100. That's what it seems. I don't know, but I'm just saying this is the language that has come out. So these are the reasons why we review these on your behalf, and try to get these things clarified before they're passed, which doesn't always happen.
Right.
There is, as far as, just so we've been very condominium heavy, I just want the listeners, for those of you who live in the HOA world, there was a lot of changes in the HOA Act the last couple of years. And one of the things that we talked about as an organization, we went up to Tallahassee with the legislators, was perhaps taking a breath on HOAs and let's see how the legislation last couple of years will impact positive or negative, and then kind of work it through there. So I do know there's a couple of bills that have been proposed, Travis, but to bring in an ombudsman for the HOA world, and I don't know where that's going to go, but I just wanted those of you who live in the HOA world to know that we're not ignoring you. It's just the legislation right now that is most hot and heavy seems to all apply in the condominium setting, and cooperatives a little bit overlapped in that regard.
Yeah, the ones that I would pay most attention to as it relates to HOAs are going to be the porous bill. I think it's 983, if I remember right. And then there's a McLean bill. And those all those will end up having to get worked out because they do not match up at all, and we'll see where they go. But as part of that, there's some club fee language and all kinds of things that we're working on just this morning, and met with some attorneys yesterday on it, and have our folks, our CAI attorneys working on it right now. So we'll be working on that.
I just want to say thanks so much to Matt for putting all these great resources in the chat. If you guys are not paying attention in the audience, there's a lot of great information in that chat. So make sure to take advantage of that. And I see a lot of you guys are answering questions as they're coming in. So I really appreciate that. Any other bills we want to touch on before moving forward?
There was one, is there a discussion of expanding the I believe Val means the My Safe Florida Home Trust? I don't know.
Yeah, there is the My Safe Florida Home for
But
home.
I think that's what Val's referring to. So go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, but also the for condos. Yep.
So there is a bill, House Bill 851 refers to the My Safe Florida Home Trust, the creation of and how it would be funded. I don't know that there's a Senate companion yet.
Yeah, there is.
There's identical will be Senate Bill 1466.
1466, thanks.
And there's some comparables. There's some other things in for single family homes. There's the Home Hardening Act, which is in there, which is a tax-free exemption for garage doors, windows. There's a couple others. Nothing as striking as last year's that went on for HOAs, but there is some HOA bills working their way through. But the few that I see here are more of a benefit with regard to tax-free holidays for hardening your home, and rate change, cancellation policies, and non-renewals on residential property. There's a bill for that, which is just basically more consumer information coming from the carrier to the homeowner. So.
Right. There was a inquiry about Senator Osgood's bill, which is addressing the structural integrity reserve study, and the possibility of exempting certain condominium associations that don't meet a specified height or are in a particular structure. So that is out there. Yes, Cynthia, that is a bill that is been in the House and the Senate. Not that it's early on, not sure. It's right now. It is in its. It has been in the Senate, at least sent to a committee.
Yeah, again, it's important to watch all the bills. I don't see that becoming a huge priority bill. I think pieces of that might find its way in some of these other bills, but I really think given this year, I think they're going to pass fewer bills overall, just the legislature, because like I said, they're behind. But I also think the associations, Michael, to your point, especially like the HOAs, there's been a lot of changes that have come at them, and I think we need a little chance to breathe and catch up on some things. So I just think, regardless of what's in some of these bills, I think it's a less is more approach this year that the legislature is going to take. That's just, again, my observation on it.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in on the difference between 3-story buildings or 6-story buildings and what's included. I think that kind of gets at the heart of a lot of the pain that people are having with these reserve laws, is that they don't want to be mandated to fund their reserves. But the fact remains that those 6-story buildings, 5-story buildings, 3-story buildings all have roofs. They all have painting. Their balconies will eventually crumble if you don't take care of them. So the costs, I like to remind people, like, these bills are not making these costs higher for folks.
Right.
They're making them aware of the costs, and they're making them face the reality of the costs. But the roof doesn't care whether the bill applies to its 3-story roof or a 2-story roof or a 6-story roof. Those costs are still going to exist, and our industry, the real estate industry, banks, insurance companies, buyers, realtors are going to want to know that a community has a plan for replacing those, whether it's mandated by the law or not. So just keep in mind, if you're hoping for this to go away or not be applying to you, even if the law changes, those need for repairs and taking care of our buildings still exist. And if we don't have the money, if a board doesn't have the money to do the repair, it won't get done. It doesn't get done. The project can't get done. So then the repair doesn't get done, and then the building can become safe, whether it's a 1-story building, a 2-story building, or a 6-story building.
And Matt, I just want to highlight 2 of your points there, because you're right, whether it's 3 stories or 6 stories, but we have had, because we have some fellow delegates of ours and some around the state who have mentioned, why the 3-story cap? Like, what about the 2-story buildings? They have the same potential challenges, repairs and structural needs. But so it's not mandated under the current statutes, but again, 2-story buildings, you really should be considering these things yourselves. And obviously you are still required to do your reserves in the condominium world. And the second part was, even if this legislation was to somehow be minimized or go away, Matt, I think one point you made, which I really want to highlight, is what we have seen, at least in my industry, in the law firms, and I know you've seen it, Chuck, as well, is the insurance companies and the banks. They are now, in particular, the insurance companies they are the ones who are requiring or pushing to see that you are doing you have certain repairs that are, the roofs in particular meet a certain requirements before they're even willing to offer insurance. Banks, if you're looking for a loan for your association, there are certain requirements the banks have added that are going to require these things. So know that this is not going anywhere.
Yeah, to capitalize on that after Ian, because obviously the Southwest coast, we were inundated with storm surge. We had our carriers were asking for engineer reports, not the milestone, but a report from our engineer saying that we were structurally sound. So, and then at the following year, it was even before like the city of Naples had the milestone requirements set on how to receive the reports, the carriers were already asking for the milestones. They're already asking for the milestone report, period. So, and it's the same thing that we've seen from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Like, they're coming in asking for the same things, even if the association didn't even have it done yet. That's going back 2 years ago. So they're still going to ask for them. So there's no getting away from doing these things. You just need to put a process in place and work with your reservist, your engineer, and your attorneys, and make sure that you have the plan in place so that you're not standing in the way of somebody either purchasing or somebody selling in your community.
Good stuff. So there are many other bills, guys, but I see it's 2:35, so we're past our witching hour. But I want
goes by when you're having fun.
I know. I personally, Marilyn, want to thank you guys again for putting this together. For ACE by TSK putting this together. Travis, Chuck, Matt, always great to be educated by you guys and be a part of this team. For all of you who stayed with us today, I on behalf of myself, I want to thank you, and I look forward to working with this team that you see here and the rest of our fellow delegates, and our chapter executive director, who's awesome, to continue fighting the good fight up in Tallahassee, and again, to reiterate what we talked about, please stay involved. Get your community member, tell your neighbors, your friends, your board members, your management team. Spread the word that the way we work, the way we can potentially be most successful is by collectively letting the legislators know where we see things that are no good and where we see things that should move forward, and bring things to the attention, bring these things to our attention as well. But they need to hear from more than just the 24 of us.
Right.
Correct.
So much, Mike.
All right.
I want to give, we do have a few questions. You guys have been fantastic, especially in answering questions behind the scenes as they're coming in real time. Matt, thanks for all your dropping the links in and everything like that. This was super, super helpful. I want to give you guys a chance. Michael, I know you have to run. I want to say thank you for helping us make this session possible, and bringing us all together. So truly thank you. Charles, Travis, Matt, if you guys would like to stick around, you're welcome to. We're going to jump into a few last questions, speculation if you'd like. Otherwise, we will let you guys go and see you a bit later.
I appreciate it. I've got to record another Zoom thing before another meeting, so I got to get and record our little video. So
No
I got
problem.
but if the other two guys stay, they'll be able to answer anything anyway. They're the subject matter
No
experts.
pressure, guys. No pressure.
Right. Talk to you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow at our F.L.A meeting.
Yes.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you, everybody,
Good.
again.
Chuck and Matt, we do have a couple more questions, and as I said that, guys, we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions, although I appreciate the enthusiasm so much. We do have a couple. If you guys are interested in checking out the questions, there were a couple, Matt, I see you even typing back here to Richard if you want to answer that out loud.
Yeah. I thought maybe that'd be a good one to discuss instead
this is
of
all just bonus now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so Richard had the question, why on the CERS, and someone had an earlier question, is a door considered part of the CERS list? It is. It's listed as windows and doors. The CERS list also includes plumbing and electrical systems on there. I don't personally think those are structural items to a building, but the fact is that that's why they put them in there. Why they put them in there, I don't have a really good answer to that. I know they wanted a list and they wanted big expense items. Windows and doors in some communities, all of the windows and doors of the association's responsibility, and that can be a giant potential liability for costs when they wear out. So that's, I think, why they included them in there. In Condo 2.0, the Senate Bill 154, they clarified that it's just for common area doors. And so that's, I wish I had a better answer, but it's similar to other items. If they're on the list, so they must be part of it. And I would go back to my other comment about the door is not going to last forever. It's going to have to be repaired or replaced at some point. So whether you're mandated to fund it a little bit as you go and start setting aside funds now, or you just have a bigger expense to the poor folks that are holding the bag when that failure happens, in the long run of your community, it doesn't make a big difference. In fact, it'd be usually better and less expensive to fund a little bit as you go and to save up for those items. But as to why it made it on the list and why the plumbing and electrical made it on the list as well, I'm scratching my head on that one a little bit as well.
That's interesting. My guess would be, because maybe to get to some of it, you might have to affect the structural integrity of the structure. Could that be it? Because some of it is within it. Maybe that's their reasoning. I don't know.
Perhaps, right? Yeah, if you have a leaking windows and doors over time, that certainly could be a detriment to the structure. Yeah. As for the links, I'm sorry I didn't go to each of these. There's so many bills that we go to the links, but I think you should, John, if you go to the just go to the myfloridasenate.gov page, you can type in each of those numbers and you can get the full bill analysis and bill text and everything in there. So just www.floridasenate.gov would be.
I'll get when we send out the email with the evaluation to everybody, I'll make sure the links that were placed in the chats throughout the day will get to everybody. So we'll take care of that as well.
Much. Yeah. And thank you really, Matt, for keeping up with the conversation and throwing those in there as we're progressing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Really.
It's a lot. There's a lot of them out there as we alluded to, and there's dozens that we are tracking as an organization that we didn't even get to today.
Exactly. I appreciate the highlights you guys were able to give.
Let's see.
Hey guys,
go ahead.
Let me interrupt for once. Isn't there a link from the CAI F.L.A page, like a bill tracker? Does that still exist, doesn't it, on the F.L.A website?
Let me see if I can drop that in here.
Because that would be a big help too.
That's a good point. I don't know that site.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay.
Perfect.
And that will actually give kind of like, it gives a status update. And then if you click on the bill, it'll pull you right to the language. And then when you go through that, kind of give you a crash course. If you have not been on this, it'll take you to a website called trackgovhawk.com. And then when you click on the bill text that files, it will pull up your Senate or House page. And then from there, you can then go into the companion bills or the comparable bills that share that language. Which is sometimes helpful to see how, because sometimes we'll have a bill that gets filed and then there's no companion on it. Well, if there's no companion, there's nothing even comparable, then it's going to be DOA. Like there's no way it'll go. They might pull some of that language from that bill and stick it somewhere else, which is kind of how we saw the 26,000-pound gorilla known as the commercial vehicles parking in HOAs. That's how we saw that last year. But that's a good way to get around. So go through that link, and then of course, top right hand corner, there's a little join CIA button. We always encourage that as well.
Nice plug. No, that's cool. I've been going about it the long way. I think this is a super shortcut. Thanks for sharing that, Chuck. I learned something today too.
Full circle. Excellent. I think we had another question. Let's see.
Yeah, John thinks it's on the Senate website too. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Now, the one before that from Richard, maybe for you, Matt, is there any movement to stop allowing associations from waiving reserves? Wait, I assume.
Not any more than there already are. I think that right now you can waive reserves. If you're in a condo that's 1 or 2 stories, the homeowners can waive 100% of their reserves still. If you're in a condo that's more than three or more stories, right now you can only waive the non-structural reserves. None of that is changing. And then homeowners associations, you can waive reserves as long as they're not. You can still waive reserves. Now, waiving of the reserves did a couple of years ago take a higher threshold now, so it's a majority of the voting interests required to waive reserves as opposed to majority of the quorum. And sorry for the co-ops. In the most part, when it comes to reserve law, co-op follows condos. CDD doesn't have any reserve laws, and I don't think we have too much on CDDs that we're tracking at this point that I'm aware of. Chuck, do you know of anything on?
No, I do not see anything right now.
I did see someone put the 973. That does appear to apply to special districts, but I'm not familiar with that one. So we'll I'll take a look and see if that's something that should be added to our radar.
Well, it's special districts. It also has to do with like waiving homestead property tax in the event that you're like, let's say you have a secondary structure on your property. Let's say it's like a guest house and you are renting that guest house out for something that could be considered workforce housing. So either somebody's at 80%, 100%, or 120% of the AMI for that district. And you're renting it out, like say to a school teacher, fireman, essential personnel, or somebody that fits that program. Well, then the county or the district would have to waive whatever your property tax is on your property. That's the nuts and bolts of it. But there is a few other lines in there.
Awesome.
Thanks. I had no idea. Ron, I'm not aware of anything changing the nomination or elections for HOAs. One thing, and hopefully we should be emphasizing this, and I think we did with the beginning, but all these are proposed. There's nothing right now that's an official change. These are all just discussions of potential changes. So no specific change at this point for HOAs, and I'm not aware of anything. Chuck, are you, regarding director nomination and elections?
No, right now, I mean, the way from 2024, the way it shook out was you're still following whatever your documents state, except for section B, which would have to do with if you're behind on your assessments, or you're in the rears, or you've got fines, so on and so forth, that would disqualify you from being on the board. But in an HOA, you still nominate yourself from the floor during the actual election. So that was as of 2024. So.
Excellent. And thanks for reiterating. These are all proposed bills, and that's part of the fun of this conversation, is that we're speculating on potential impact, but we're talking about, really getting into the highlights of what's on the table, which is excellent.
Yeah.
The co-op. So was My Safe Florida money, Denise asked, is My Safe Florida money available to co-ops as well as condos? I don't believe so. I think that is strictly just condominiums.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Good question.
I think Carl asked a hard question about
Yeah.
the other HOA bills we should keep an eye on. I mean, if you guys would
Uh,
like.
yeah, let's go back to that tracker. I think that Chuck just shared, and can take
Yeah.
a quick look to see if there's some others on there that pertain to HOA specifically. Those are the big ones there.
Yeah, you
Some
guys
of,
did a really
yeah,
good
some of the construction bills I think would apply to some of that might apply to HOA as well. Like we were talking about the statute of limitations, statute of repose, that could impact homeowners associations. Ownership of single family residential property by business entities, House Bill 1593 certainly could apply. The door alarm, we didn't touch on the door alarm one. Chuck
Yeah.
mentioned that could apply to an HOA too if it passed.
They have it on where you have to have an alarm on any door that leads to a pool. So like the high rise I manage here in Naples, Sea Point, our main lobby empties right onto the pool deck. So we would have to have an alarm on that door. So every time the door would open, that alarm would go off. Well, it's cumbersome, and I understand where it's coming from to stop children from drowning, so on and so forth, and everybody's all about safety. But if you were to put an alarm on that door, plus there's severe penalties that go along with it, if you don't have it, or if every year when it gets inspected, if it fails inspection. So it's one of those things where, you know, you might walk out, you know, the front of the building, walk around the building, and then walk up the back staircase because you don't want to set off the door alarm to get to the pool area. They have the same thing for residential homes, which is kind of mirrors what was getting pushed through last year for single family, which basically stated you have to have some type of alarm on your single family home on a door that leads to a pool when you sell the property, or when somebody purchases a new home, it has to have it on there as well. I'm not clear on the inspection portion of that. I just know that it's, if you go to sell your home, it's requiring you to have an alarm on that door for the next owner. So.
Yep. Also, there are, I don't know if we mentioned it, there is a bill in both House and Senate about to create a homeowners association ombudsman. Now the condos have an ombudsman, but the homeowners associations do not. For you condo owners that are paying $4 a door, there may be some concern about how that ombudsman is funded through, I think the proposal is that we use the condominium money to fund the homeowners association ombudsman, because the homeowners associations don't currently have that same fee. So I'm not sure where that will go, but that certainly could pertain to HOAs, to your question, Carl.
Awesome. Wow.
Great.
Guys, I mean, I am conscious of your time, and you know, certainly we can't possibly answer every question. If there are a couple here, if you do want to jump in, or if you have really any lasting impressions or additional speculation you'd like to share, please go for it. Otherwise,
I'm not gonna speculate. You know, we don't ever want to speculate because we don't know how this session's gonna shake out.
Course.
But the legislators, it's when I got involved with F.L.A going back 2020 to now, there's more legislators now that live in communities than there was before. I'll tell you that. Usually we were dealing with one or two legislators who actually lived in a condo or maybe lived in a gated community, and the others were like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's a different world. Whereas now more and more are living in those, so it's an easier conversation. So we'll see how this one shakes out. Again, it's kind of, there was so much done last year and the year before that it's kind of one of those years where you wanted to see things kind of slow down a little bit, or maybe a couple fix-it bills here or there. We'll see how some of these bills shake out. But just stay tuned and stay active. And, you know, as Travis said, the first 30 days, it's kind of, there's not a lot done on the floor because everything's going through committee, but it's that next 30 days after that, that's when it gets hectic. So that's where if you see something you don't like, you know, get with your community, get with your board, reach out to your legislators and tell them like, hey, this doesn't work for us, and tell them why it doesn't work. That goes a lot further than just saying, hey, that bill stinks. If you give them an actual reason why it stinks, well, then they can put that to application when they go to the floor to debate it. So.
Thank you.
Well
I really
said.
appreciate that. Yeah, very well said. Any lasting impressions, Matt? Advice?
No, stay involved. I think almost half of Florida's population lives in community associations, so they are listening. We are a big contingent, and it is it's going to be a way of life for decades and centuries to come here. So condos and HOAs are not going anywhere, and so the lawmakers are cognizant of that. So just stay involved, and thank you for the time today and getting yourself educated. That's great to see so many folks on here today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you guys so much for giving us so much of your time and
Well, thank you for the invite. It was great. Thank everybody for having us. It was a great event. So.
great session today. And we won't take any more of your time. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. And we'll be publishing this, this session on acebytsk.com in the next couple days. So thank you guys so much. Jeff and I will stick around for a couple more minutes just
Thank you,
to wrap
gentlemen.
up.
Thank you,
See you
everyone.
later.
Good seeing you both.
Bye,
Take
guys.
care. Bye-bye.
Wow. What a day, huh?
Well, we didn't have to talk much on that one. So we both got
No.
our voices back from the earlier session. So that was that worked out well. That worked out well.
That's for sure. Well, thank you guys. I just, I want to say thanks so much to the audience, whoever is really still with us. I know probably you guys are, heading out for the day, which I don't blame you. But thank you for spending so much of your time with us today. This was a very special and unique kind of day that we were excited to put on so that we could have some of these more genuine conversations, some of the behind the scenes, some of the stuff we just don't get to hear about and really dig into too often. So for me, it was really successful, really informative, and a lot of fun. How about you, Jeff?
I'm just pissed that Michael remembered the name of the How the Bill Becomes a Law cartoon, and I couldn't
Oh,
think
the
of it earlier.
Schoolhouse Rock. I could have told you
Schoolhouse
that
Rock.
one.
That was on the tip
To
of my
edit the
tongue
music
earlier,
into.
and I just couldn't think of it, and he just blurted it out like it was nothing. But
Yeah.
no, but it was a great day. I much prefer these informal discussions versus the stuffy types of things. So this was refreshing. It was great. We can't thank our sponsors and our partners enough, and most of all, we can't thank you all enough for hanging out with us today. It was a long day, and it's just this is just fun stuff where we're both nerdy about this. We anticipate a lot of you are nerdy about this stuff too. And with that said, before we take a couple of generic questions that came in ahead of time, Marielle, I just want to mention to everybody, if you would like to see more of this, courses that aren't necessarily, or discussions that aren't necessarily for CE credit, or perhaps even CAM and board member informal discussions like this, where we, for example, maybe we enable your microphone and we anonymously don't have your name up there, just attendant, so you can voice a concern and nobody will know it's you. And we just discuss everyday stuff that goes on in an association, informal, with a drink in your hand, and we just discuss this stuff at the end of a day. If that's the kind of thing you'd like to see, let us know. We can do stuff like this with you and put something like this together where we just share.
If there's other programming you're interested in seeing from us, we really want to, include you guys in how we're offering education and conversation and building communities. So
Right.
let's do it together and just let us know. We're really open. We're looking to build. We're looking to engage you guys in the ways that you're looking to learn and to be part of the conversation. So yeah, let us know. Don't hesitate to reach out and let us know what what you're looking for more of. And if you happen to be in South Florida, which I know many of you are coming from all over the state today, which is part of the beauty of a digital conference. But if you happen to be in South Florida next week on March 12th, we have an in-person event on March 12th in North Palm Beach. You can find all of our live events right now just in South Florida, but maybe more to come later on. Pompano Beach, Boca Raton, and North Palm Beach. You can find it all on acebytsk.com, as well as in that resources and content section, a ton of free content, webinars, just really good information that we've been, collecting and that's available for you guys to learn from. So we really hope you'll take advantage of it. These sessions will appear there probably in the coming days. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, in a few days.
And you
A few
guys
days.
can share them with your colleagues, share them with your communities, share them, with your board, and just maybe, you know, even as an impetus for getting some good conversation going in your own communities.
Absolutely. And what I was going to say too is be on the lookout to the email that you used to register for today's event, whether you attended 1, 2, or 3, or all of them. That's where we will be sending tomorrow an evaluation email to all of you. It'll just be a link, just to thank you for attending with a link, and we'll have everybody's contact information. We'll get the links on there that Matt and others posted in the chat, both in this session and in the previous sessions, and any other resources that are pertinent to what was discussed today. So we'll have that going out to everybody. And when you get that evaluation, that's where you can type in your commentary to let us know what you would like to see in the future.
Awesome.
And let me just see here before we go. Let me see if there are any questions that are not legal in nature that we can answer. There was one I did not get to answer earlier that had to do with associations and how they can save money.
Okay.
And the question was essentially, what are some out of the box types of things that you've seen done? And this is kind of what I mean, where when questions like this come up, we could have like a manager or a board member powwow where we just all talk about stuff that we've done to help out other associations that might be looking to do the same thing. So for example, back when I was on the field, one of the ways that we were able to help offset annual increases, not that annual increases didn't happen, but we went into a contract to allow a company to put in cell phone towers, for example. I think it was a 35 or 45-year contract, and the association I was running at the time was guaranteed like $85,000 a year, something like that. I forget what the number was. It's been a minute. But for whatever it was for that 35 or 45-year period, the association was getting X amount of dollars, and it incrementally went up by a certain percentage every year, and that went to help offset costs. So that's one out of the box idea to help us save associations money. Not everybody can do that, but that's just an idea. Another thing that I've seen done are the association taking ownership of units and renting them out if that's permitted. You want to check your documents and all that good stuff. Another thing too, we had Marcy on earlier in the day from Hotwire, and we were talking a little bit about community channels. Like if you have a bulk cable agreement, you get a community station where you can have your own bulletin board style programming on there. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you're permitted, depending on what your docs and what the cable company says, you can put ads on there. So maybe you have a local restaurant that wants to advertise to your association members, to your owners and residents, about what they have at the restaurant or special, whatever it is. You can put ads on there and have a revenue stream from there to help offset maintenance costs. So, ads in the mailroom, ads in the laundry room. You can do little things like that if your documents allow for stuff like that. So just a little out of the box thinking,
I like it, Jeff. Very cool.
And that was really the only question that I didn't get to answer earlier.
Well, it was on your mind. You needed to make sure you got it out of your system.
Yeah,
Oh, we had a great, that was a great session, how to save money for your community, as well as emerging technologies and trends. So if you guys didn't catch that earlier, we will be posting the recordings, and we encourage you to reach out to, the experts that were on that panel or opt in through our evaluation form to be contacted by them. I did just drop our LinkedIn page in the chat so that you guys can follow us and keep in touch with us there. Of course, acebytsk.com. That's our website. You guys are going to hear more from us in terms of our digital offerings, virtual events, and things like that. That's really coming more towards the summer. Starting in June, we'll have a really nice weekly run of webinars. So about 13 weeks worth of content, primarily CEUs that you guys can participate in. We may do a panel here and there, may integrate some more discussion style content, but we really hope you guys keep in touch with us, keep up with us, take advantage of all the great offerings that we have. We're also on Instagram, we're on YouTube. But if you touch base here and there on our website, especially if you opt in to get our emails, you should see everything that we have going on. And we look forward to having you guys participate with us throughout the year and like we said, please reach out to us if you have any suggestions for content you'd like to see, things you're looking for from us. We'd love to hear from you.
Sounds great. Thanks, everybody. It's been a long day, and I think we're going to call it a day on that note.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Jeff.
You
Thanks,
too.
everyone.
Thanks for everything. Thanks for attending. Thanks for choosing to spend the time with us. Have a great day, everybody.